Do that now.
2, 1. All right, welcome back, guys. This is DDP here with Ari Timken, and we are here to talk a little bit of Cowboys football the day after a frankly embarrassing offensive performance. Ari, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I mean, it's yeah, it was a difficult football game to watch, which sucks because you wait how many months after the off season and all the BS through training camp and all the storylines, and it's like
Yep.
you wait all that time, you get all geeked up and excited, and that's the poo poo platter that the Cowboys serve you on offense.
Yeah, no, from an offensive standpoint, it was about as flat and embarrassing of a performance as we could have expected, frankly. They tell you all off season that they've addressed the creativity issues. They got rid of all the coaches they put blame on, whether it was Derek Dooley, whether it was the running back coach. Assessed blame everywhere except for the three guys at the top of the coaching staff. And then push comes to shove, and what do we come to find? It's a lot of the same. I didn't see a whole lot different there on Sunday. I don't know about you.
Well, I mean, there were some things I suppose that were different. I mean, we haven't really seen them run five wide receiver sets with two tight ends. I don't know if it's good, but it's different.
Yeah.
It was yeah. I mean, it's. I think the thing that's probably most upsetting is it sort of validates what a lot of people thought about this team this entire offseason. And
Mm-hmm.
despite, kind of if we believed like maybe they will be a little bit more creative and maybe they will be a little bit more innovative. And, you know, Jason Garrett today, I tweeted out one of his quotes from his press conference, but he basically was asked from Mike Fisher from 105 to the fan about being conservative, and then Fisher basically was like, well, you had a package that included two tight ends and a fullback, and his quote was, I don't believe that two tight ends and a fullback is conservative,
Conservative,
and it's
yeah.
like, maybe it's not conservative, but it's stupid. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, it's bizarre. I think the thing that's upsetting is we heard that they were going to be more creative. They're going to be different. And, I guess they're different, but there's just not much optimism schematically for this organization right now. That's the thing that sucks, I think,
Yeah,
is
absolutely. I
it's
mean,
a coaching staff that completely seems unwilling to evolve, adapt, and grow. And there's just modern aspects of football that are just completely absent from what they're trying to do. And it's like trying to put a round peg into a square hole. Like it's just like, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think it's going
right.
to work.
No, I agree 100%. And, you have the offense not even crack midfield, not even into Panther territory until the second half. And, I mean, just somewhat of an idea of how bad this team was offensively. I mean, this is the second worst total yards performance for the Cowboys under Dak Prescott. I think the only one now, you could technically say three if you include week 17, 2016, but I don't like to loop that one in because that one is including that's the Philadelphia game week 17 where he played one series and then you have Romo and Sanchez take the rest of the game. So I don't like to include that one in it, but it is one of those things where from a total yards perspective, it's the second worst complete Dak Prescott game we've seen. Does that make it more of an outlier, or does that mean things are just reaching a new rock bottom here as far as offensive, efficiency and whatnot?
It's a good question. Look, I think because football is played once a week, it gives us so much time to think and linger. And there's a great quote from Rick Carlisle talking about the NBA playoffs, coach of the Mavs. I know you know that, but just speaking on that for everybody else. He says in the playoffs in the
I've heard of
NBA, when
them.
you lose, you'll feel like you'll never win, and when you win, you feel like you'll never lose. I think the NFL is just like that. When you lose in the NFL, you feel like you're never going to win, and when you win, you feel like you'll never lose. And you know, look, I think there's a lot to be pessimistic about, especially schematically, offensively,
Yeah.
especially about Dak too. I mean, I don't want to, Dak was bad. There's just no
Hmm.
way to sugarcoat it. Dak was bad. He missed a lot of throws. I mean, he missed some routine throws.
Yeah.
Forgetting the Blake Jarwin throw he missed a lot of routine throws too. So, but at the same time, there's so many different components that go into each game: mentality, psychology, the way you game plan. And I don't expect this team to go 0-16. I expect them to be more competitive. And despite what's crazy, Derek, is they played so bad offensively, and we're still late in this game in position to win it. And
Or at
I don't
least
want to
tie. Yeah.
downplay the faults of this team because they're there.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, as bad as they play, I mean, they basically had one good possession, and because their defense, they were still in it with one good offensive possession. So
Yeah.
it's a long season, and I still expect this team to be fairly competitive throughout the rest of the year.
Right. And that's a good point you were bringing up there regarding how bad the offense was. They faced on the whole day one third down of less than 3rd and 7. That was a 3rd and 3, which by the way they failed to convert. Their average down and distance on 3rd down I read was 11 yards, like just over 11 yards. For the first half of football, or just before halftime, I think it was, they were averaging on 1st down 1 yard on 1st down, and it was just run into the wall. And you saw costly penalties from the offense, this offensive line. I think for now, we need to stop saying this is the best offensive line in football because I know you don't have Travis Frederick out there, and maybe Connor Williams can eventually become something, but Connor Williams was overpowered, and granted, Short is no joke of a player, but he just bullied him. Not just that last Dallas possession where he pushes him back into Dak 2 straight plays, but even throughout the game, he gave up, I think it was 2 sacks, 3 pressures, and like 4 total hits or something like that. I mean, it was he was abusing him throughout the day if he really put down to it. So the offense had no chance in this case, and this puts Dak, as you said, it's starting to create a trend for Dak. I've been one of those people that say, his first 25 games outweigh to me his last 8, because in the last 8, the reasoning we gave was Tyron Smith and Zeke only being on the field with him for a total of 3 snaps. Well, now he had both of them this Sunday, and now we're looking at the last 9 games of Dak Prescott. In 7 of those 9 games, he hasn't even thrown for 200 yards, and in 8 of them, he hasn't thrown for at least 215 yards. So it's bad. I mean, it's starting to string together enough now where you're like, okay, this might not be just a little
Right.
blip. This might actually be the new norm, at least with this offensive system and play calling.
No, I think what's funny is, I mean, Joe Looney played pretty well, and
Hmm.
and I mean, you're right about Connor Williams. I mean, there were some plays that just stood out as him just getting completely worked. But I mean, K'Wan Short Aaron Donald's the best interior defensive lineman in the NFL, but K'Wan Short's probably second or third. I mean, he's right up there.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think on the whole, and I mean, you're right. The offensive line is not the best in football, and they're not going to be until Travis Frederick is back because he's that good and he's that important. But I think the offensive line probably played better than we expected them to. So that's where it's like, okay, it's scheme and it's Dak. Those are the kind of things that really stood out about why the offense was so bad. They just did not. This looked like, Derek, and I don't know if you have the exact stats, but I mean, you recall that stretch last year without Zeke where they were
Hmm.
like they were historically bad offensively. Like they didn't score a touchdown in 3 games. They
Yeah.
were like one of the worst. And that's what even though they scored a touchdown, that's what it felt like through most of the game. It just felt like an offense that just couldn't do anything.
Right. And
And
that's true. Yeah.
that's so much of that is on decision making from the quarterback and then scheme. And I think the truth of it is we don't really know who to blame because Jason Garrett after the game basically said, well, I mean, sometimes the reads aren't there, so he kind of put some of that on Dak and the decision making. So it's one of those things where you just don't know. That's the unfortunate piece is we can sit here and say, well, Dak didn't make the right read or the scheme didn't call for it. But I mean, early on, everything they're throwing was east-west. They were not even looking to stretch the field at all.
Yeah.
They had two. They continually ran Jeff Swaim and Blake Jarwin out there. I mean, Jeff Swaim was on 99% of their offensive plays. Jeff Swaim caught like 20 total passes in 3 years at Texas. And now, like,
And had
now
like
he's on
three
99%
career.
of their offensive snaps. Like,
Yep.
it's mind-boggling. I'm not trying to say that Tavon Austin and Deontay Thompson are these unbelievable playmakers, but they're better playmakers than Jeff Swaim and Blake Jarwin. And it's just there's just so many components of this DDP where it's like it just boggles the mind. They don't seem to have any schemes that make sense with what the NFL is today.
No,
That's
I agree 100%. Swaim played in 58 of the 64 snaps. That's 91%. And something interesting to me that also stood out, we talked about how this offense, they kept telling us that they were going to be a little more creative this year. And even if you set aside, like, okay, Zeke only had 15 carries, they never used him really in the passing game unless it was some kind of just little dump down to him, in which case Carolina had that snuffed out time and time again. But even a guy that was supposed to be like a bit more of a gadget player for them, a versatile player for them, in Tavon Austin. Tavon Austin had 10 snaps in the game, 16% of the plays. And that to me was just baffling, because you look at him and you say, well, he's got speed for the number of guys on this offense, especially at receiver, who don't have a lot of speed. He's one of them. But if your two starters are Hearns and Terrence Williams, those guys aren't especially speed guys. Of course, you've got Tavon Austin and Deontay Thompson, and I thought it was interesting that, in that last drive when things are starting to move a little bit for Dallas, and I think it was even the case in their touchdown drive as well, it was getting Deontay Thompson going. Or the one play that did work for them was slants pretty much to Cole Beasley. So it was a weird game where nothing they did was exotic. It looked 95 or more percent like the offense we've seen the last 3 years. Only now they don't have the personnel. The reason this worked in 2016 is because you had the best offensive line in football. You had a perfect situation for Dak, even though he was a rookie and a fourth-round pick. There was no tape on him yet. The league didn't really know what they had to do to guard him. And you have Zeke as well in that situation where you have a very versatile running back as well. And they still had some more fuel left in the tank for even some of their weapons like Dez and even to a lesser extent Witten. And so that was a better situation, even though they didn't have as good of a defense, I feel, as Dallas has today. It wasn't as good of a situation. Now, we've kept trying to keep this formula sort of the same, only now it feels like we have much lesser parts, and now there's tape out on Dak, and it's like they don't know how to adjust, even from a play-calling standpoint.
J-Farm D on the comments doesn't think we watched enough film and basically says that there were 0-9 routes called.
Okay.
So 9 routes, the straight deep ball.
Yeah, no, they didn't go vertical at all. Nothing vertical.
I don't know what J Farm is saying, but yeah, I mean, okay, they didn't call any 9 routes. I guess like teams know what they're trying to do. I mean, there was a 2nd and 17 that the Panthers basically put 9 guys in the box.
Yeah,
and the Cowboys still ran it.
Yep.
I mean, it's a stubborn offense with guys that are believe that they just need to execute, and that when they execute, they're going to win, as opposed to out scheming teams. And like the 2nd and 17, where Carolina brings everybody but 2 corners into the box, like, throw the football. You've got one-on-one matchups on the outside. Take advantage of that, and they're unwilling to do that. And that's whether that's Dak, whether that's Linehan, whether it's both of them. I mean, that's just not a recipe for success. You need to be able to take chances on the outside, especially. Again, it's one example, but it's a 2nd and 17, and you've got one-on-one with your 2 receivers split out wide, and you still threw the football, or you still ran the football.
Right. Yeah, and even when they did throw, Dak had not one pass that traveled more than 15 yards in the air that was completed. Obviously, we have the terrible play to Jeff Swaim, where Swaim's wide open going down the field, and Dak pretty much hits it on the toe of his shoe. Swaim has to pretty much stop and wait on it just for it to reach his foot. It was that badly underthrown. And if he leads him on that, I mean, I don't know that it's a touchdown, but it's certainly a very nice game, the best play of the day for the Dallas offense. So I don't know what it is. Dak had 5 or 6 just awful throws, I thought, yesterday watching the game. and they're going to have to do something. I agree with your assessment earlier that they will get better as the season goes on because they didn't get a lot of preseason reps. They got afraid of injuring their players or seeing someone get hurt after Martin. And granted, that game had several knick-knack injuries for some of these guys, including a couple scares that could have been more significant, like Zach Martin. But they basically made the decision that they weren't going to play Dak or any of the important players for the dress rehearsal game, or, of course, you never play them for the fourth game. But it
Right.
just limited for guys that don't have a lot of rapport with each other for how much change there was in this receiving core. It limited their time to work together in a live game simulation where guys actually hit each other. And it looked like it showed. And I thought Zeke, it showed for him too. Just the fact that he hadn't played really physical where he actually has to get hit. He looked like he wasn't quite his usual self out there. Did you see any of that at all?
Yeah. And like part of me just wants to completely say, like just like what a lot of people are saying, which is that this thing is going to go south and down in flames quickly. But again, I think they have so much talent on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah.
That and especially given what difficult of a matchup it was in the interior of that line. Now, the Giants present a problem too. I mean, they've got a pretty good line, and so it'll be another difficult task for them next week against the Giants, and they have a difficult schedule. But I also think at the same time, like, they are going. I'll say this: if they don't show more offensive firepower in week 2, and all of a sudden now we're looking at week 3 where they can go 0-3 against Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't put it past the Cowboys to make a change offensive coordinator.
I mean, they would have to at that point if it gets to there and it's looked as inept as it has this past game, then yeah, you have to consider it. But it's one thing, like, of course you don't want to overreact to what we're seeing, but for how bad things looked yesterday, if this continues as a trend, and like I said, I wanted to set aside most of what I saw in the final 8 games last year. But now with this first performance, now you start to look at it and go, oh, dang, maybe I shouldn't set that aside. Maybe I should give it at least some weight. I think you still have to take a little bit of salt with it just because of what I said with Tyron and Zeke. But it is something interesting to kind of percolate on, and just to – I feel like you have to keep it in the assessment at this point. Another interesting stat that caught my eye, I read it, I think it was – I can't remember who it was. It might have been John Jock Taylor who's had it. But Zeke's had 3 games in his career of under at least 80 yards rushing. All 3 of them now have come in the first 2 weeks of the season, which kind of is interesting. It means maybe he's a little bit of a slow start, and the last 2 preseasons, he didn't get a lot of action in the preseason. So you wonder if that has some kind of impact.
What was that? I didn't catch it.
Zeke has 3 games of fewer than 80 rushing yards in his career. All 3 of them have come inside the first 2 weeks of the season. So I was basically saying you wonder how much of that, for at least this case and last season, how much of that might be related to not getting those preseason game reps and everything, where he's starting a little slow. Because this preseason, they didn't play him at all in the preseason. They basically kept a bow on him the whole time, saran wrap.
But also think about it from this perspective. The Panthers had not given up a 100-yard rusher since 2016.
Yep, 21 straight games. That's a great point.
Look, I do think that there's issues in terms of them not having reps together enough in training. I mean, the reality of it is they played week 1 like we've seen from this Cowboys team throughout the entire preseason. Now, granted, some of that Cowboys offense was run by Cooper Rush and a bunch of guys, but I'm of the belief that you practice like you play like you practice. And so in week 1, it looked a lot like what we had seen through an 0-4 preseason. So, again, players were in and out of the lineup, but that's just what we saw. We saw a defense that was fast and was getting to the football and
yeah,
it was opportunistic. And we saw that throughout the entire preseason, and we saw that in week one, and we saw an offense that couldn't score points, couldn't have sustained drives, so it was just more of a continuation from what we've seen the entire preseason.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, I'm in this thing right now, and I'm
Yo.
going to tell everyone right now that this is the Dallas Cowboys. And if we look at 2014, if we look at 2015, 16, 17, it always been like that week one. If you really look at it and dive into it, 2014, it was a horrible game. Dallas Cowboys lost to the 49ers. Of course, we all know that Tony Romo threw 3 interceptions. And everybody was saying that the 49ers going into the Super Bowl. Colin Kaepernick is the best thing since sliced bread. And they went on ahead and didn't do anything that year. But the Cowboys went 12-4. And then you move forward to 2015. That was the remarkable game that Tony Romo was able to wheel the team back to the win against the Giants. You guys remember that game, right? But he still had several interceptions. The team didn't look like they was all on one page. And then we moved forward to 2016, the exact same game that we saw from yesterday. Ezekiel Elliott, everyone was saying that he was a bust. He only ran for 51 yards. Dak Prescott barely moved the ball down the field. Dez Bryant was washed up at that point. So we going back and forth of the same thing with this Cowboys. And it is what it is. I think that, like you said, the reps that we get in practice and preseason is just not there. I think that they played it too safe, and it counts so much to have that continuity and poise out there, and it just showed.
Yeah, no, I agree. They have had a recent history of starting slow in seasons where they ended up playing well. But I feel like you can't say like, okay, well, it's happened twice before, 14 and 16, and so that means it's likely to happen again. I mean, I think they'll be better than what we saw Sunday, of course. But
let's look at it from this aspect. Didn't Ben Roethlisberger, Big Ben, threw 3 interceptions as well as 1 fumble? So should right now, still a nations right now say, hey, what about this other backup quarterback at this point? What about Jimmy G, the 49ers quarterback? Didn't he get out there and wet the bed? Is the 49ers right now thinking, should we not pay this $100 million to this quarterback? I mean, teams start off slow. And I think, what's this guy that played for the Texans? Winston. I think that's his name. Deshaun Watson. Okay. Yeah. Watson, Reggie Watson. Randy Watson, right? So this is the thing. It looks like he didn't play all preseason. So right now, Texans should be saying to themselves, did we make the wrong move? Should we got Pat Mahomes or whatever the guy named Mahomes for the Chiefs? So everybody right now, the starting off from week one, they're gonna look like this. And I know I hate to say this. Is Dak Prescott the best passer of the ball? No. Now, is Jason Garrett, can he will this team and get everybody ready week one? No. That's why I always have the same reservation for is when this team goes to the playoff. When they have that bye week, it always cringes me because I know for sure Jason Garrett is just not that guy to have people ready, right, locked, loaded, and ready for those games. It's just what it is, guys.
I feel like based
on Law, what makes you optimistic about this offense moving forward?
Still, the pass of what Ezekiel Elliott can do. I know for sure that not every team is going to hold Ezekiel Elliott to 60 yards. I just don't believe that. I think that not every team is, and especially the stupidity of the coaching staff and the foolishness of them not giving Ezekiel Elliott the ball. I think that next week they're going to, coming around the corner when they play against the Giants, they're going to be determined to give Ezekiel Elliott more than 15 carries. So just off that alone, I think that that right there can have this team to score more and be more possessive and clock minded of the ball. So I think that is why I'm optimistic about his team.
See, here's the thing. I mean, I agree with you. They need more carries for Zeke, but teams are going to stack the box.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want them to do because I think that this team is
Carolina more. They couldn't. I mean, Carolina did, and the Cowboys did not challenge one-on-one situations. So. Look, I agree with you. The offense is not going to be as bad as it was in week one, and there's
Not
100
everybody
reasons.
got a Keywan Shorts and the Dontario Poe that's right there in the middle that's going to collapse that pocket. And on top of that, we understand that number 52, he's a learning in progress. Right now, to me personally, he needs some more bricks in his pocket. They need to probably rotate and move him out to the edge, maybe at right tackle will work out for him. But, Dallas Cowboys not going to fall on the sword, and nor La'el Collins is willing to move inside. So that's going to be a problem right there down the line. But every week, this guy, number 52, he's learning, he's gaining knowledge and understanding of the game. So I think that he can step it up maybe around week 3, week 4.
He'll have some kind of increase.
Damon Harrison next week.
Mm-hmm.
So not everybody has a K'Wan Short, but the Giants certainly next week they've got Olivier Vernon, not Jason Pierre-Paul, but Damon Harrison, Olivier Vernon, Hankins. They're pretty.
They don't have a 6'5", 245-pound quarterback. I think that Eli Manning still likes to hold on to the ball.
Sure.
And those sacks. So it's always a trade-off. Now, granted, the Giants have a better defensive back out there, and also they have better front seven. Well, I don't know. It's very comparable.
Right. And my point wasn't that they're better, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Here's the thing that I'm worried about is it seems like we continue to make excuses for the Cowboys offense, whether it be, they're not looking to stretch the field at all vertically because of Dak, or they're not looking to stretch the ball at all vertically because of the schemes. And at this point, I don't know who to blame from those things. But when you get one-on-one matchups on the outside and they bring 9 guys in, they've got to hit those. And against Carolina, they didn't even try. They didn't even audible out of a run. They continued to try to run the football. And you've just got to take your shots there. They're just, there's nothing that we've seen from Jason Garrett or Scott Linehan that indicates that they're willing to be anything other than conservative. And that's the thing is you can win a handful of games probably with teams that want to put 9 in the box and you can still run it because Zeke is that good. But they're not going to they're not a playoff team. They're not a good offense if they cannot challenge teams in the outside on one-on-one matchups. And they didn't challenge. And Carolina's got the corners to challenge one-on-one, and they didn't do it.
Yeah,
it's my box.
Really didn't do it. I agree with that aspect of it. They definitely didn't try to take the ball down the field, and that's shame on the Cowboys. And more so, shame on Dak Prescott too as well. He have to figure out a way to step up through the pocket, trust what he sees with his eyes, and explode the ball out of his hands and get it out to the edges. But it is what it is at this point.
Right. Yeah, I think the difference in the case of Dak compared to some of the other quarterbacks you mentioned earlier, in the case of Roethlisberger, even setting aside his history and 2 Super Bowls there, you're still an offense that has Antonio Brown, and you're still someone who, at some point, presumably, I imagine. Who knows now with it? I was going to say at some point you got to think the Le'Veon thing will work out, but who knows? They could end up trading him or something like that. So there's still a offense with weapons to spare in that case. And then if you look at, I think you mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo, he's 5-1 as their starter, and even if he got off to a rough start yesterday, his overall body of work for them is not only so small, but it's still overwhelmingly positive for them as the starter. And similar with Watson, he set the league on fire until he tore up his knee last year, so I'm not worried about that. I think there's a much greater sample size here that's putting up red flags now for Dak. Like I said, his last 9 starts, he's had 7 of them where he failed to break 200 yards passing. Another one, so 8 out of the 9 where he failed to pass for more than 215 yards. So his trend has been going down since the bye week basically last year, and he's going to have to assess that. And I think part of it, I don't think it's all on Dak. I don't. I think part of it is the play calling of what Dallas is doing. It's very predictable, and it's kind of trying to make him something he's not. I don't know if the play calling works best for his style of play, and it's like the rest of the league has kind of figured out how to guard him, and Dallas is still using him in mostly the same way, it feels like. So they're going to have to do something different, and that's got to be a coaching change with Scott Linehan. I honestly don't know why they kept him around this offseason. I
already know what you're talking about, but scheme is everything. And just like you said, It may be the coaching's aspects of it, but look at this right here. The Eagles, Nick Foles, 50 quarterback rating, 55 completion. All right, Dak Prescott, 81 quarterback rating, 65 completion. So is it the fact that they both teams look horrible? Of course, game one. But is it the fact that the scheme helped out Nick Foles? You see, they didn't get their offense rolling until they was able to do a trick play, whereas the guy was able to do a loop around and pass the ball to him. Yeah, Philly special. So, I mean, I'm not trying to compare Nick Foles to Dak Prescott because I do know that people will try to put that out there in the atmosphere. But what I'm saying is that collectively, sometimes the scheme can help out your young quarterback. And right now, I don't think that Scott Linehan has those bag of tricks inside his weaponry. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to run the ball with Ezekiel Elliott. And I know it's not fun to hear for Cowboys Nation because it's never good to talk about a team like we are right now when we're losing because everybody ready for the crash and burn. Everybody ready for Jerry Jones to get out the pink slips and fire everybody right now. I understand.
Yeah,
I'm upset just like everybody else,
but it's not going to happen.
But it's not going to happen. Yeah. Jerry Jones. It's hard to prove 1,000 there that he's wrong, right? Somebody who making six figures, it's hard to prove they're wrong. Can you imagine somebody that's making billions? You trying to prove to him, hey man, you're wrong about this.
Well, I mean, just look at Jason Garrett for that case. I mean, the argument of Garrett being a head coach to still keep around. I mean, we're 8-9 years into this experiment now, and that's just head coach. I didn't even count his tenure as offensive coordinator, which even in that regard kind of had one good season, which then didn't even produce a playoff win. So I look at the whole Garrett era as are we still doing this? Like, have we not accepted that we need to move on? If everything is perfect and they have the perfect offensive line, at least a good if not great defense, and they're healthy, then maybe he can get them somewhere. Hasn't proven he can do it yet. He's gotten them, one playoff win in his career? So it's just not a good match at this point. The experiment has gone on long enough that I feel like they need to just look elsewhere because it's not all him, but the problem starts at the top, and obviously Jerry's not going to make himself step aside. He'll have to step aside eventually with Steven, but at some point, you got to make the change at the coaching staff and not just the underlings, but the actual head coach and his main coordinators.
You're right. All right, what do you think? What you think about this question right here? Do you think that Ezekiel Elliott should get at least 25 carries a game? That's what he have to hit.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I'm of the belief that they need to get him more involved in the passing game. I mean, it's just this guy, when they drafted him, guys, I mean, they talk about 5-tool players in baseball. This is a legit 3-tool player at the running back position. The guy that can block as good as he runs the ball and that can catch the ball as good as he blocks. I mean, that's so, I get him 25 to 30 touches a game, whether it be, running the football and in the passing game. It's mind-boggling. They can't seem to figure out a way to scheme him into more touches, especially in the passing game. Like, this is one of those things, statistically speaking, guys, it's relevant to note that, passing to your running back is one of the most productive plays in the NFL, especially on early
McCaffrey.
Yeah. But not 3rd and 21.
Right, well, exactly right. On a 1st and 10. 1st and 10, the most productive play on a in the NFL is throwing to your running back. And I mean, the Cowboys just don't do it. And they've got a running back that's get him the ball. Get him the ball as much as possible. There's just no, you talk about not having a number one receiver. Well, you got a number one offensive piece in Zeke Elliott, and only give him 15 carries and a lot of your point, get him in space at 3rd and 21. It's mind-boggling how they can't figure out ways to get him the ball. So 25, 30, whether it be 20 to 25 carries and 10 touches catching the ball. I mean, look at the Saints. Look at how deadly Kamara is catching the ball in the backfield. I mean, look at the Panthers with McCaffrey. I mean, The Cowboys have a guy that's that good as far as being a pass catcher, and they don't utilize him in that way. It's just this is an old scheme with an old coaching staff that does everything by the book, that has no innovation and no creativity, and they're not using any of the modern techniques of the National Football League to their advantage.
Yeah.
Hey, this is the thing. Noah Turner forgot more football than Scott Linehan probably knows. So I don't blame if the Cowboys figure out a way to go get Shane Gailey to be the offensive coordinator. Somebody, anybody out there outside. Now, the only calling card that Scott Linehan can bring on, because he had Megatron and he couldn't give Megatron the ball. He had Dez. We saw what kind of career Dez had when Scott Linehan was here. The only calling card for him was Randy Moss back in the early 2000s.
98 to early 2000, something like that. Yeah, I can't remember when exactly. Yeah,
it's crazy.
But
right, so he's stealing money. Somebody need to go find a way to do something to Scott Linehan about him on his coaching staff.
In the case of Norv Turner, man, he was sent away from Minnesota, and as soon as he went away, Stephon Diggs and Thielen both kind of broke out a little bit. So, I mean, that was believed to be something kind of against him in that regard, and yet he looked fine in his play calling and everything yesterday. So it's hard to say. Now, granted, most of that game was just Cam and McCaffrey being, better off options than anything Dallas was able to really contain or slow down. And I understand obviously no team will have a 6'5", 250 quarterback out there other than the Carolina Panthers, but it's still something that Dallas has to be able to prepare for. And kind of pivoting to the defense a little bit, there were times, especially in that first half, and I don't recall it a whole lot in the second half, but in that first half, they looked like they weren't prepared at all for him to, kind of RPO roll out the other way. Damian Wilson in particular bit horribly on that. I think it was a 29-yard run that Newton had, and it was something where them running on second down was just throwing Dallas for a loop, and it's like, this is what he does. Why are you so shaken by this? Why are you so caught off guard by it? And that's what allowed them to jump out to the 10-0 lead. Dallas outgained them in the second half. The Dallas defense tightened down in the second half for the most part, and it just kind of came down to that slow start, which is another thing that we kind of see from Garrett in, I was going to say more so late games, like late year games, like playoff games or December, but hey, it showed up in the opener too.
This is my biggest draw or my biggest gripe, and I love the Cowboys. Just because we criticize, it's good to have strong opinion, guys. And I do understand that a lot of people may think I'm hating, but this is the thing: the Cowboys need to go out there and get a veteran quarterback to help Dak Prescott out. Whether it's Mark Sanchez, even if it's somebody out there who can really tell Dak Prescott, okay, in the moments of time, this is what they're trying to throw at you. Because I don't think, just to the core of me, I don't think that Cooper Rush can give him any insight. I don't think that Mike White, nor do Kellen Moore or even Scott Linehan can give Dak Prescott the information that is needed. I think that, if we can just help Dak Prescott in those factors, because he's the quarterback. Yeah. There's nothing that we can do at this point but try to see what we can do to improve. Maybe Dallas Cowboys need to go out and find a good old veteran quarterback that can be in his hip and just tell him, like, hey, this is what needs to be done. Because right now, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Ryan Fitzpatrick is doing wonders out there of leading that team. And I understand that Jameis Winston is the quarterback out there, but we can only imagine if this guy, Ryan Fitzpatrick, have another game like he had the other day, what the echoes of the quarterback world is going to be out there.
Yeah, for Tampa Bay, especially since they're doubtful about if they even want to stick with the Jameis era and everything. But well, I mean, we have to see it. It's a long season, and for Dallas, as long as they don't bring in someone like a Brad Johnson type, I don't want to see that experiment. If we get to the point in the season where we're not looking at Dak, I think you're stuck with Dak regardless for the season, because Cooper Rush isn't that guy, and Mike White, he could have eventually the potential to be that guy, but he needs some serious seasoning before he gets there. So let me hit a couple shout outs here on the chat.
By the way, I think that's a great point by Law. I mean, Kellen Moore doesn't have an NFL win.
Right.
Correct.
And this goes kind of back to the Linehan thing. I mean, Kellen Moore is Linehan's guy. Kellen Moore was drafted by Detroit or went undrafted and was picked up by Detroit initially when Linehan was there. Obviously, when Linehan came here, he brought Kellen Moore. I mean, so not only did they not fire Linehan. They gave him more power. They
Yep.
gave him his own quarterback coach, and Kellen Moore. So, it's I agree. I don't know who that veteran is, but it's clear if Dak isn't getting better, that there's just not the right voices around him. And we know how good Sanchez was for Dak his rookie year. And I'm not suggesting to bring back the Sanchez, but I mean, I think you're right. They have no veterans in backup, and they have a guy that hasn't. I mean, how can a guy that hasn't won an NFL game as a quarterback in Kellen Moore try and talk to Dak Prescott about winning games? It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
I always like to give weird analogies. It's kind of sort of like this. I never drove a stick shift before, but I'm gonna show you how to drive it, okay, Ari? You know what I mean? it just would not work that way, and I don't understand for the life of me. Player acquisition is something that they have to understand, and it is what it is. At some point, they're gonna have to do that. They're gonna have to reach into the pocket, and I love the show that you did the other day when what's this guy, your co-host, name tip of my tongue. Jesse Holly, he was saying he was talking about you just can't go out there and use and get stuff for cheap all the time. Sometimes going the cheap route just don't work,
He was probably talking about the kicker at the time, Maher.
Holly, by the way, Holly was on fire yesterday. Right. It was awesome. I was just like, I'm gonna stand back and let you roll, baby.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I gotta roll, but
okay.
Law, salute, brother. DDP, you guys keep holding it down. You're killing it.
All right. Thanks, Ari, for coming on.
Absolutely, guys.
Peace. Salute.
Later. All right, update that. Let me hit some of the shout-outs here to some of the people we got in the chat. We got Jesse Ortiz, Stevie Mac 23, Brett Bender, Rob X Garcia. Here on Phantoms chat, we got Diego Maestros, Chris Bennett, and Eric Kushaney. Sean Moore, what's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, a lot of the problems I think Dallas faced yesterday. Yes, Dak had a bad game, and yes, now they're starting to string together enough where you can start to say, okay, this is starting to raise a red flag, because now we don't have, if we had excuses built in last year, which, how many times have we said excuses are tied to the Cowboys in general, whether it's the coaching staff or the players or anything like that. Now we're starting to see more lining up to the point where you start to say, okay, we might have to actually assess this for what it is. Dak is regressing, it looks like right now, because his mechanics still aren't sound. And in year 3, for him to still have happy feet, still feel the pressure and not get his erratic mechanics under control and drive off his back foot, it's concerning. I mean, a lot of these throws he's missing 5 or 6 just awful throws a game, including the much talked about Jarwin pass. Those are situations where he gets happy feet because he's either feeling pressure or he's getting anxious. I don't know what you make of it, but it's starting to raise a serious red flag in year 3, I feel like, because at this point we're talking about going into his 3rd full season as the starter. You know what I mean?
Right. I understand that. Yes, he got to go through his progressions a whole lot sooner or faster. And on top of that, understanding the down and out distance. I just don't think that you're going to win the game when it's 3rd down and 12 or 14 and you're passing a little shallow pass out to the flats to Ezekiel Elliott. At that point, somehow they're going to have to establish the identity.
Right.
And the identity of the team is you drafted all these guys to be in the trenches, and you drafted Ezekiel Elliott with the 4th overall pick. You have to figure out a way to give him the ball and understand whether it's 2 yards, and then you get the ball again and it's 3 yards and it's 4.
Yeah.
That's still something that now you have in the minds of the opposition, that they're trying to run. So we're going to try to stop the run, and then you hit them with the play action. But if you lining up and you got everybody in a spread formation, and you taking out 50% or 60% or 70% of your looks, and they saying it's pass, and we already know we're going to sit on these routes because this guy's not going to pass the ball deep down the field until he prove it to me. I'm going to sit on these routes and I'm going to pick the ball off. And trust me, next week the Giants got some nasty guys out there that can pick the ball off. So if somehow, some way, We're going to have to take vertical seam routes. And I'm not trying to say run away from the DBs, but you're going to have to take some vertical seam routes. And we saw that last year when Rod Smith was able to catch the ball into the mid vertical route there, look, button hook route, and he was able to run up the field to score the touchdown. So they're going to have to utilize the middle of the field, because that's where the Giants want you to throw it at, in the middle of the field, and you got to run on them. You can't be one-dimensional.
Yeah, and the problem is, until Dallas can manage to establish the run, which they're going to be hard-pressed these first few weeks, just between, the minimum. We don't know when we're going to get Travis Frederick back, so you're going to be hard-pressed in that regard. I think Connor Williams, of course, will get better. I think he's got the ceiling to be a very good player. But right now, he's a little undersized, and he's going to get bullied. Even next week, he's got a tough assignment again. So he's going to have to they're going to have to find a way to work around that. Because Looney actually had a pretty good game against the Panthers. The problem is, if we have a Travis Frederick there, maybe he can still have a good game and offer a little bit of help and a little bit of added protection to Connor Williams next to him. Looney's like, I can do just enough to keep my guy in check. I can't worry about your guy as well. And that's just the reality Dallas is going to have to face. So them running the ball on first down in particular, it looked like the Denver game from 2017 in the first half at least. It was just Zeke running into a wall. He's lucky to get 1 or 2 yards. Dallas averaged 3rd and 11 in the game. In the first half, they were getting on average 1 yard on first down. When you're in those situations, you're not going to be able to. Dak is not the quarterback for that. And I would argue even elite quarterbacks are going to struggle against that. When you're averaging 3rd and 11 and they had 1 third down of less than 3rd and 7 in the entire game, a 3rd and 3, which they failed to convert, you're not going to be able to do anything for that. And part of that comes from self-destructing, whether it's penalties from the offensive line. Tyron had a pair of bad penalties. Lyle Collins had bad penalties. I don't know if we saw a penalty on Williams, but Williams gave up 2 sacks, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and 4 quarterback hits on the game. So you look at things like that, and it's a concern, because you're going to have to find a way to win in the passing game. You're going to have to find something you can do to keep the opposing defense on their heels just a little bit. And they offered zero creativity in that game against the Panthers. The only reason they even got their successful drive is because they went to a up-tempo offense. So they basically started grinding it out and just trying to keep Carolina on their heels just from that regard. But it's not anything that we haven't seen before, and that I don't think that's going to work, especially in a division rival game. The Giants see them twice a year. If you roll out the same, obviously it's not the same game plan week to week, but if you roll out a similar game plan, I just don't see this offense being able to produce unless this was just a total aberration and it's going to be like someone flipped on a light switch and the whole team looks completely different. Because based on what we saw yesterday, I don't feel strong about this offense for the first few weeks at least, while they get their chemistry and rapport down with one another.
Well, I have to go back, and I know people don't like this, but let's look back at 2014 again. I know Romo's coming off a back injury, but it was one of those things too. The team looked lethargic. They didn't look like they can move the ball. It looked like Tony Romo was targeting the 49ers to passing them the ball. And then on top of that, the very next game, they played the St. Louis Rams at that time. And it took them all the way. Yeah, they fell behind. It was 21-3 or 21-0.
Yep.
And the team didn't click until like that second half. And when Tony Romo was able to will the magic over. Yeah. And one can argue the same thing about 2016 Dallas Cowboys. It was the same slow, lethargic look out there. Everybody didn't look like they was prepared. And I do understand the aspect that nobody knew who Dak Prescott was in 2016. They didn't know how to really play him. But his college tape was out there, and everything that these scouts were talking about, that was out there. So it took them until like the second half against the Redskins to really get everything going, because that was the same game that Ezekiel Elliott, even coming off of that game, he fumbled the ball, and so a lot of people was like, hey, we was looking better, because I seen it, and I got some screen capture stuff of the Cowboys fans said, hey, look at Ezekiel Elliott. He can't hold on to the ball. Let's start Alfred Morris. There was collective fans out there saying, let's start Alfred Morris over Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, the fans still out there. And, you know, a lot of people were jumping ship at that point. So it is what it is. It's always a slow start. And I'm not saying that the Cowboys are going to go 13-3 or 12-4. But what I'm saying is that this team didn't practice it at all during the offseason, preseason, as far as a real game. And then on top of that, if you look at it, there's a stat that was out there, or there was an announcer that said that Dak Prescott never played with these group of receivers until that Sunday. So it was crazy for him. The first time ever play with those group of receivers collectively. It's just crazy. So for this coaching staff now to get everybody prepared and ready.
Right.
Because they didn't really have a dress rehearsal, you know.
True. And I would say the 2014 schedule wasn't a tough one. It was, you know, comparatively speaking, a much easier schedule than what they have this year, of course. 2016 was another easy one because they were coming off a 4-12 year. And I do think that has to weigh in to some degree. Now, you still have, in both those cases, you're still opening up early in the season with divisional games, and those are going to be tough and a grind in their own respect. But I would argue Dallas has a much tougher schedule they're facing this year than they did in 14 or 16 for those examples. But it's just one of those, it's something they're going to have to sort out, because this looked like at least offensively, a train wreck. Defensively, they looked much better. I see signs there. Yeah, Jalen and Sean Lee both had 4 tackles each, and neither of those popped. Sean Lee in particular, he missed 4 tackles. I mean, he looked probably about the worst game I've seen Sean Lee that I can remember him playing, and I think that's just him not getting those reps.
That Denver game.
That was, yes, that's true. That was a really bad one too. Yeah.
The good thing about this is that Denver game, after that Denver game, Sean Lee had the light switch to kick on. So I'm thinking that maybe, just maybe, you know, it could be one of those things where Sean Lee himself, he didn't play as much as preseason. So I mean, it's just one of those things where I'm not trying to be a Cowboys apologist, but it's still just too soon for me to just say, okay, I'm going to jump off the ship.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying jump off the ship. I'm simply saying it was one of the things that stood out to me. The defense, I see the signs the defense can be good, but you know, I get it. Christian McCaffrey, the dude's got some agility, and he's got some moves and shiftiness. He shook Jalen once or twice, and it was like, oh, like that was one of my key matchups I laid out before the game, was Jalen dealing with McCaffrey whenever they wind up in space, and the advantage went to McCaffrey in that case. You saw McCaffrey bulldoze Sean Lee and keep running at one point, shake him off another time. Like it was a bad game from Sean Lee. And in spite of that, the defense held them to 16 points. I mean, realistically, had Carolina not just imploded for an extra point, it would have been 17 points. But it was a pretty good showing from the defense. You get 3 sacks on Cam Newton. Would have had a 4th. DeMarcus Lawrence looks like a beast right now. That's your one real silver lining in this game. He gets 2 sacks. The only reason he doesn't get a 3rd is because Cam Newton is 6'5" and fell forward just enough to get back to the line of scrimmage. An average quarterback, that would have been another sack. But I mean, that's you look at that looks good. You saw Malik Collins get a pressure in there and get a sack. Randy Gregory, I don't even know what to make of him. He had some plays where he at least got pressure. What stands out to me, and I don't mean to harp on the draft, but as good, we give so much credit to the Cowboys for the good draft picks they've had in recent years. One that glaringly stands out to me, and you're a film guy, so maybe you can give me some kind of correction. I've heard the claim of why this wouldn't have worked in the other way, but even in a game like Carolina, where I thought Taco, I was like, okay, he's getting pressure, he's around the ball, he's making some kind of impact. You meanwhile look over at the Pittsburgh game, and TJ Watt's got 11 tackles, 4 sacks, and a blocked field goal that saves the game from being a loss. So it's one of those things where you're just like, yeah, hurts to miss that one. And, you know, we'll see with Jalen if he can be Notre Dame Jalen Smith. And this was maybe just another kind of an illusion, so to speak, and he'll be better than what we saw yesterday. But That's another thing. You could have had Miles Jack. You know, you look at situations like that and you're like, we've had a lot of really good picks. We might need to acknowledge we've also had a couple that didn't quite pan out. I mean, Randy Gregory might end up being the biggest bust in the Jason Garrett era. Yeah, I'm putting that over even Claiborne, because Claiborne at least played a bunch of games for you, even if he never saw anywhere near the ceiling, you thought.
Because I'm looking at J.J. Watt, I'm looking at Luke Kuechly that we could have had instead of Mo Claiborne, and then we actually traded up to get Mo.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's one of those things. But shout out to Mo Claiborne wherever he's at. I hope he's healthy. So
yeah, who knows in that case, but. Yeah, I'm frustrated looking at it because I get it. The scheme is different. We don't have the same defense that the Steelers do from a schematic standpoint. And for that reason alone, you hear that the Cowboys didn't feel great about him as the pick, and that's why they went with Taco. I think Taco will be a serviceable member of this defense, but I think you look at him and it's like, that's a dude that can be very special, and that's what you need. That's a guy you could have had there. So
on the high end, you can say Greg Ellis. On the low end, you can say what's that guy named Ickabar, whatever that guy's name.
Yeah,
somebody can help me out in the chat box. But Taco, he's gonna fit well on this team when the defense start getting a little bit down the line. I think week 5 or week 6, we should still see the defense being who they are. This defense going to have to be the identity of the team. I think that the defense must figure out a way to help this team out, just like the Ravens did back in the day, just like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did back in 2001, 2, or whatever one of those years.
Yeah.
So this team going to have to lean on the defense. Now, what we want Dak Prescott to do, and I told everybody during the offseason, we just want him to drive the bus. But it seems like he was trying to do more than drive the bus the first game. And that's why we looked the way we looked. I think that the team just still going to have to give Ezekiel Elliott 25+ yards. And winning heals everything. Because right now, we're not talking about Nick Foles, right? I just mentioned Nick Foles' stats earlier when Ari was on. 50 completions and something like that, 50 quarterback rating. What was it? His QBR was like 60 something.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying, but when you win, it covers all that stuff,
Right.
And it makes it, and it appears that everything is okay, but the offense could be lethargic. But then on top of that, their defense is just lights out. The difference between them, they actually picked got the interceptions.
Yeah, they made
get upfield and stuff like that,
Yeah, they made plays in that regard. That's one of the things in this game that we were talking about it during the game even. That was one of the missed opportunities. I feel like the Dallas defense had a generally solid game, certainly a much better second half than the first half. They outgained them, I think, in the second half. Carolina, it was almost like the offense mostly shut down, and the only problem was the Dallas offense couldn't do anything to dig themselves out of the hole. And a lot of that comes from the defense, but the defense also had opportunities. They forced the one fumble in at the 5-yard line, and they had the opportunity a couple times, whether it would have been a pick or, you have the one where Heath misses what would have been a tips pass pick inside their own 5-yard line at that point. 2 plays later, Cam Newton runs it in. And you have the situation where, who was it? It was Cheeto. Cheeto forces a fumble, and then Wright gets to the guy he ripped it from. Wright gets to drop right back on top of the ball and cover it up. So you had opportunities, and sometimes that's just the way the ball bounces. I get it. But you look at that, both of those drives ended up in touchdowns for Carolina, and there was an opportunity on each drive to stop it. So it just is. It is what it is for them. I don't think you were on yet when I brought up this point earlier. What is your thoughts to Jeff Swaim playing 91% of the snaps for the Cowboys for tight end, and meanwhile Tavon Austin, granted obviously not the same position, seeing 10 snaps?
Let me see these words I can pull up. Despicable, putrid. This is the thing. This team went back to not even 1990. The team just went back to last year as far as the play calling.
Yep.
And I think that's what Jason Garrett was comfortable with, or Scott Linehan Wade in the press box. That's what he was comfortable with. they're gonna have to figure out a way, even though Rico Suave, I'm not gonna call him Zeus. He showed the most promise out of all of the tight ends during the preseason game. So
I mean, we were
still
saying
hard
that.
to coach. Yeah, it's still hard. It's hard to coach 6'8". You know,
Yeah.
the guy can find ways. I think that
6'8",
pass
280.
that bounced off of or 6'7" or 6'6", however tall he is. The ball that bounced off. He's taller than Dante Thompson.
Yeah.
The ball that bounced off his hand. Of course, the ball was passed a little too high. But I think that a tall tight end would come down with the ball in those situations. I think that this team is just going through the growing pains. But one thing we fail to realize and fail to point out is that you have one of the youngest teams in the NFL.
True.
And you have one of the old school, non-changing coach in the NFL who we already know that I guaranteed. I didn't even watch the press conference, but I already know that he did. How you doing, guys? I know he did that. And why did nobody – I'm blaming the media now.
Yeah.
I don't know why nobody said, well, we're not doing good, Garrett. You tell me how we doing. You know, I know they kind of a standard that they got to keep to be professional with these coaches out there. But we know that Jason Garrett is going to say, how you doing, guys? He's going to say that, and he's not going to change. So with him not changing and with him not being able to change just that stance or that statement, I know he's not willing to change this offense. I think that it was pointed out earlier today that he was saying that it's they're trying something new with 2 tight ends and 2 running backs. Well, I think that's a 22 personnel. I think that he said, yeah, that's something unique. And I'm sitting there like, no, not really.
Right.
A fullback and a running back and 2 tight end. High schools run that route, you know, so. Or run that particular personnel. So it's something going to have to work out.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at it this way. I think Dak is a little bit of a conservative by nature quarterback. He likes to kind of play it a little bit safe. He plays within himself. When we have a dynamic enough offense, or not dynamic in the way of creativity, but a strong enough offense where we're winning battles at our positions, whether it be the offensive line up front, carving out lanes for Zeke Elliott, or you have, 2016 Dez, even though he missed some time, his numbers were still pretty serviceable for that. He could still win in his matchups. You had this situation where he could play within himself and still take what was there. And now that they've regressed in terms of the ability to dominate in those ways, both the offensive line, so Zeke's not getting the same holes to run through he had. They don't have Dez there now. The receiving core looks nothing like it did. And it's caused Dak to be, I think, a little more timid, even because now there's not as much availability there. And I think it's causing him to second guess. Then on top of that, I think Garrett is, to your point, way as conservative and old school a coach as it can be from a philosophical standpoint. He views everything through the scope of the 90s Cowboys and their Super Bowls and all of that. And I get it. I get the idea of like, okay, we're going to build around this offensive line. We're going to try and replicate that formula. But the problem is when you can play smash mouth football and your offensive line can knock those dudes 5 yards off the line and your running back's going 4 or 5 yards every play, if not breaking it for a big gain, it is a thing of beauty to watch. But when you can't win those battles up front, it's almost unwatchable. Just watching Zeke hand off smashed into the middle, nowhere to go. The only times we popped during the game last night, the 2 or 3 times he got like a 7-yard gain because we're like, oh, there's some room now. I think he had a 12-yard run as his best run yesterday. And because our expectations had been lowered that far that we were excited about a 12-yard gain, whereas 2016 we'd have been like, oh, cool, first down. Like, we wouldn't have thought anything of it. That would have been such a routine play. And I just think it's not a good combo. The reason I think Romo was able to still work well with Garrett, and at least regarding 2014 in particular, I think Romo had, even though he was reeled in a little bit in terms of his gunslinger, Romo had enough of it still to him and enough ability and just general football IQ that he could make something happen. He could throw guys open, and he could just turn something into, take Garrett's bland layout and still make something happen. And I do think it stressed out Garrett Because if you looked at the first episode of All or Nothing, Garrett spends 10 minutes in the first episode just gushing over Dak and his ability to protect the football and not turn the football over. Like, oh, you'll just throw it away if something's not there. You don't force the issue. And it almost kind of felt like, are you suggesting something under your breath about Romo here? Like, is there some writing between these lines that, you're trying to kind of sneak by us a little bit? I don't know. I think that there was something to that where he looks at it and he's like, hey, this is the kind of guy I want, but it's not going to work in that situation when you have a somewhat conservative by nature quarterback forced into an ultra conservative system, because then you're just making Dak worse, and the things he can do you feel like aren't, they're too risky for what he wants to do. They're too flashy, I guess. And so it's like reeling him in and just completely neutering the kid, and now you see what the result is.
Yeah, but we can look back at those things, and we can also look at other things too as well. Now, I have yet to see the game because we talking live right now, but right now Matthew Stafford, one can argue that he's light years ahead of Dak Prescott, and he's everything that we want to see out of Dak Prescott. But here's his stat: 27 of 46, 286 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 INTs. Now, if that's the type of quarterback that we want on the Cowboys team, then hey, go for it. And sometimes you can take the risk, you can take those measures and risk it all.
Yeah.
And then you can have those type of performance out there. And those type of games is hard to erase from your mental. And on top of that, you don't have anything to show for it down the line. And I'm not saying that Dak Prescott is better than Matthew Stafford, but it is what it is. And then they also had Matt Castle too as well, to pass for 6 and also pass an interception. But this is the thing, Cowboys Nation, we can dream and hope and wish for a quarterback that can launch the ball and throw the ball down the field, because Matthew Stafford is one of the best in the business. But that don't win you games. What wins you games is also collectively scheming quarterbacks to pass and also scheming to run. We just saw, and I just read out the stat, what Nick Foles did earlier, and they were still able to ultimately win. And it's just one of those things. This staff going to have to figure out a way to scheme and coach these quarterbacks to play to win. And then on top of that, if they go back to the main thing to help them win the game, they drafted all these offensive line, and they drafted Ezekiel Elliott 4th overall. I'm going back to that same point. You're going to have to figure out a way to give the ball to Ezekiel Elliott. There's nobody in the chat box right now. All right, for those who really want a quarterback that can launch the ball and throw the ball down the field, I think right now the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, can call Denver, well, not Denver, but the Detroit Lions, and say, okay, we give you a 2nd and a 3rd, and we also trade you Dak Prescott for Matthew Stafford. Who will make that deal right now?
Stafford's got a big contract, but a lot of years. A 2nd and a 3rd plus Dak for Stafford. It's a high price, but at the same time, I've seen how we draft in the 2nd round. We take these guys that have high ceilings, but they're projects, whether from a health standpoint or, in the case of Gregory, off the field issues. I don't. It's hard to say, but I would be interested.
Throw the ball down the field. You know what I mean? I mean, that would be a no-brainer in some sense, right? I mean, if you don't care that much, if collectively people don't care that much for Dak Prescott.
I think part of Stafford's problem is he's been stuck in Detroit his whole career. I mean, that's a step up. That's a step up from the Cleveland Browns in that regard. So,
yeah.
But
I mean, but the Jets are the Jets. They beat them for this. Sam Darnold. Who's this guy? Sam Darnold,
youngest quarterback to ever start a game, I think I read. But
yeah.
They've got adjustments to make for sure. The defense, there's some promising stuff there, but the question is, will they be good enough to lead and carry a lesser Dallas offense? The script has flipped officially. The Dallas offense is no longer the strong point. It's now on the defense to carry the offense, which is a role reversal from what we've seen the last 5, 6, 7, whatever years. So we'll have to see. Bend don't break is no longer good enough to get it done. You could argue that even though they showed something in the second half yesterday, the defense, a lot of that still felt a little bend don't break to me. Giving up 17 points, gave up a couple long drives, and in the case of 2 or 3 of those drives, they were able to at least stuff it out or create some kind of turnover. So we'll see. But Law, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me at Law Nations. Just type in or Google Law Nation. You'll see where my face, my logo, and I'm also live on a podcast. It's LAW Nation. You can go there too as well. And I'm also on Facebook, Laws with an S Nation. And you guys know where to find me at there. I also try to do film sessions, film breakdowns. We talk the real. I don't give you guys no sugar coated stuff out here. It's just like for those who out there who right now saying, okay, Matt Stafford,
Yeah.
would you trade right now Ryan Fitzpatrick for Matt Stafford because he had a one hell of a first game. So it's just one of those things. It's still too soon for the season to go. So we have to really wait and see what this thing can all unfold. But that's all the time I have for this wonderful show. I really thank you, DDP, for having me on. And remember, you guys are listening to nothing but the Bass. Salute.
All right. So you guys hit my info here real quick in. You guys can find the Dallas Prospect on Facebook or on Twitter at Dallas Prospect. Be sure to check out the website, thedallasprospect.com, your home for Dallas sports and all things pop culture. Look for a lot more writing. I'm going to start doing a lot more writing on the website moving forward. I've been doing one about every 7 to 10 days, but I want to try and go a little more in depth and do a little bit more where I deep dive into some of these stats and everything for the Cowboys season this year. So we'll see. Keep an eye out for that. And keep an eye out for other possible live remotes we have in the future. We will keep you posted on those. But that's all our time for tonight's show, guys. Thank you to everyone who watched, whether it was on the Dallas Prospect YouTube or Facebook. Silver and Blue. No, we weren't on Silver and Blue. We were on Big Game James, Phantom, Origin, Texas. We have a whole litany of pages that we were on tonight. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to Law and Ari for coming on as well. But until next time, guys, remember, every legend was once a prospect.
Yeah, what's up?